The first time room 713 called, the woman on the line was crying so hard he could barely understand her. Not sobbing, not panicking, crying the way people cried when something inside them had already broken and they were only now noticing the sound it made. Ethan Cole had been alone at the front desk for exactly 19 minutes when the old black hotel phone lit up and began to ring. It was 1 a.m. on the dot. The lobby of the Silver Lantern Hotel was empty, except for a half-dead ficus near the vending machines and the soft hum of the aquarium behind the check-in counter. Outside the glass doors, the Las Vegas Strip glowed in smeared pink and gold reflections. But inside, the hotel felt strangely sealed off from the rest of the city, like a place built under glass and forgotten. He picked up with a standard greeting. "Front desk, this is Ethan speaking. How can I help you tonight?" At first, there was only breathing. Wet, shaky, close to the receiver. Then a woman whispered, "Please, don't let him come back up." Ethan frowned and straightened in his chair. "Ma'am, are you in danger?" Silence. Then, in a voice that sounded as if her throat were closing around each word, she said, "He's wearing my face." The line went dead. For 3 seconds, Ethan sat frozen with the receiver pressed to his ear, listening to the soft digital hiss of an empty connection. Then he looked automatically at the display panel beside the switchboard. Room 713. There was just one problem. The Silver Lantern Hotel only had 6 floors. Welcome back to the channel. Tonight's story is one of those late-night nightmares that crawls under your skin and stays there long after the screen goes dark. Before we begin, tell me where you're watching from. And if you love true-feeling horror, unsettling mysteries, and stories that make you double-check the locks on your door, hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment below. Because if Ethan had ignored that first phone call, he might have made it out of that hotel with his mind intact. Instead, at 1 a.m., room 713 called again, and by sunrise, Ethan would learn something every night Clerk in Las Vegas eventually hears in whispers, but only once it's already too late. Some guests never check out. Ethan Cole had been working the graveyard shift at the Silver Lantern for just under 3 weeks, which in Las Vegas meant he was still new enough to smile sincerely at drunk tourists and still tired enough to forget what day it was when he woke up. He was 28, recently divorced, and had moved to Nevada with the stubborn optimism of a man who had run out of places to fail in California. His ex-wife had called it starting over. Ethan privately called it falling sideways with style. Vegas was supposed to be temporary. 6 months of overnight desk work, maybe a little saved money, then something better. It was the sort of lie adults told themselves because the truth sounded too much like surrender. The Silver Lantern wasn't one of the polished mega resorts on the Strip with marble floors and celebrity chefs. It sat 4 blocks off the neon artery of Las Vegas Boulevard, tucked between a shuttered wedding chapel and a pawn shop that never seemed to close. The hotel had once tried very hard to look elegant. You could still see traces of that effort in the brass railings, the chandeliers with missing crystals, the old velvet chairs faded by decades of sun and cigarette smoke. But age had settled into the building in stubborn ways. Warped floorboards beneath the carpet, hairline cracks running along the lobby ceiling, elevator doors that took a second too long to open. At night, the place changed. During the day, it was just old. At night, it felt observant. The overnight shift was usually quiet. A few late check-ins, the occasional request for extra towels, a lost gambler asking whether the airport shuttle still ran before dawn. Ethan's routine had become mechanical. Brew the weak hotel coffee at midnight, reconcile the register, answer calls, watch the security feeds, and try not to think too hard about the fact that the lobby music always seemed slightly too slow after 1 a.m. His manager, a pinched woman named Marisol, had trained him briskly and without warmth. She had a habit of speaking as if every sentence were already an argument. "Don't leave the desk unattended for long," she told him on his first night. "How long is long?" She paused while arranging room key sleeves into a perfect stack. "You'll know." It had been an odd answer, but the Silver Lantern seemed full of those. The maintenance man, Darnell, had warned him not to use elevator 2 after midnight because it gets ideas. One of the housekeepers, Rosa, crossed herself every time she passed the hallway that led to the administrative offices. Even the guests sometimes asked strange questions, whether the hotel had ever been a hospital, whether anyone had died there, whether the 7th floor had been converted into storage. There was no 7th floor. Ethan had checked. The elevator panel went from 6 to R for roof access. The stairwells ended at 6. The fire evacuation maps showed only 6 guest levels. And yet on his 3rd shift, while organizing old registration cards in the back office, Ethan found a yellowed brochure from the late 1970s advertising the Silver Lantern as Las Vegas's hidden jewel, 78 luxury rooms across 7 floors. He had shown it to Darnell. The old man took one look at the brochure, snatched it from Ethan's hand, folded it once, and slid it into his coverall pocket. "Where'd you find that?" "In the records room." Darnell's lined face tightened. "Throw away the next one." "The next what?" But Darnell had already walked off. That was the first real splinter of unease. Then, Ethan started noticing smaller things. A blinking cursor on the reservation system hovering over an empty field labeled 713 before vanishing when he leaned closer. A housekeeping cart left outside a blank stretch of wall on the 6th floor. The smell of old perfume in the service elevator some nights, powdery, floral, and rotten beneath the sweetness, as if applied to something already decaying. Once, around 2:15 a.m., he saw a woman on camera 14 standing at the far end of the 6th floor hallway. She was facing away from the camera, perfectly still. Long dark hair, pale robe, bare feet. Ethan radioed security. But Leonard, their half-awake night guard, came back 3 minutes later and said the hallway was empty. When Ethan checked the monitor again, camera 14 was showing only static and a flicker of warped lines. Leonard laughed it off and said Ethan needed more coffee. Still, the feeling lingered. There was something wrong with the hotel, but not in a dramatic way. Not in the way of urban legends or internet horror threads. It was wrong the way a family portrait looked wrong when one person in it was smiling a fraction too wide. Subtle, persistent, easy to dismiss until you realized you had been dismissing it for days. On Ethan's last normal night, just hours before room 713 first called, a middle-aged guest in a wrinkled business suit leaned on the front desk and asked for a wake-up call at 6:30 a.m. Ethan put in the request and handed him his room key. The man glanced toward the elevators, then back at Ethan. "You're new, huh? Is it that obvious?" The man gave a dry, humorless smile. "First week, never sleep in the building. Second week, start hearing things. Third week, you tell yourself it's stress." Ethan tried to laugh, but the man didn't. "Well, what happens in the 4th week?" Ethan asked. The guest looked over Ethan's shoulder toward the dark hallway leading to the staff offices. "You start answering." Then he walked away without another word. Ethan told himself the man was drunk. He told himself that when the lobby lights dimmed for half a second at 12:58 a.m., he told himself that when the aquarium filter gave off a low, choking groan. He told himself that when the phone rang at exactly 1 a.m., and the caller ID said room 713. By the time he realized the hotel had been waiting for him to answer, it was already far too late. Ethan stared at the dead receiver for a long moment after the first call ended. His own reflection looked back at him in the darkened windows behind the front desk. Pale face, loosened tie, shoulders tightened with sudden adrenaline. He forced himself to set the phone down gently instead of slamming it into the cradle like a panicked rookie in a slasher movie. There had to be an explanation. Malfunctioning switchboard, crossed internal line, prank from another room. He checked the system. The interface was ancient, a green and black software relic that looked older than he was. Most room numbers displayed occupancy status beside housekeeping notes and billing flags. When Ethan typed in 713, the field paused. The cursor blinked once. Then a line of text appeared. Status, do not disturb. Guest, Mrs. Wren. Check-in, January 14th, 1982. Ethan felt every muscle in his back go cold. He hit escape. The line vanished. He typed it again. This time, the system returned invalid room number. His mouth had gone dry. He swallowed, glanced instinctively toward the elevators, then reached for the binder containing the room directory maps. 6 floors, rooms 101 through 612. No 713. The phone rang again. He flinched so hard his chair wheels squealed against the tile. The display flashed. Room 713. He almost let it ring out. Some deep, primal part of him wanted to pretend he hadn't heard it. But he was alone in the lobby, and ignoring a possible emergency felt like the kind of decision people regretted in stories exactly like this one. He picked up. Front desk. This time there was no crying. Only a slow, uneven inhale, and then the same woman's voice. Lower now, tighter. He knows I called. Ma'am, I need your location. 7th floor. There is no 7th floor. The woman made a strange sound then. Not laughter, not exactly. More like a choking little gasp of disbelief. That's what he says too. A thud sounded faintly over the line, as if something heavy had hit a wall in the distance. Then footsteps. Not normal footsteps. Wet ones, bare feet slapping softly across carpet. Ethan gripped the receiver harder. Listen to me. Are you a guest? Are you hurt? I'm calling security. No, she whispered. Don't send him. Who? He has your voice now. The line stayed open long enough for Ethan to hear one more sound. A man speaking very close to the caller, in Ethan's exact voice. Front desk, how can I help you tonight? Then the call disconnected. For several seconds, Ethan couldn't move. His skin prickled all the way down his arms. The lobby suddenly felt larger and emptier than before, each corner saturated with shadows that the chandeliers didn't quite reach. He looked at the security bank immediately, scanning camera feeds with frantic concentration. Lobby, side entrance, parking lot. Hallways on floors 1 through 6, laundry room, service elevator, stairwell landings. Nothing. Then camera 14, the 6th floor east corridor, flickered. For half a heartbeat, the feed distorted into gray static and lines of digital snow. When the image steadied, Ethan saw what looked like a hotel hallway, but not theirs. The wallpaper was wrong. The carpet was dark red instead of beige. The ceiling lights were rounder, older, casting a jaundiced yellow glow. A brass room number glinted on a door near the center of the frame. 713. A woman in a cream-colored nightgown stumbled into view. Her hair clung damply to her neck. Her mouth was moving around a scream Ethan couldn't hear through the silent monitor. She pounded once on the door opposite her, then turned toward the camera. Her face wasn't merely frightened. It was ravaged. One side of it looked sunken and gray. The flesh collapsed as though something beneath the skin had been hollowed out. Her eyes were wide and bloodshot, and around her throat were bruises shaped unmistakably like fingers. She raised one hand toward the camera. Behind her, at the far end of the hall, someone stepped out of the darkness. A man in a bellhop uniform. He was too far away to see clearly, but Ethan knew with sick certainty that the man was smiling. The feed cut back to the normal 6th floor corridor. Empty beige carpet, standard walls, no woman, no door, 713. Ethan shoved his chair back and nearly knocked over the pen cup. He grabbed the radio clipped beside the lost and found drawer. Leonard, come in. Static. Leonard? A burst of crackling noise answered him, then silence. He tried again, nothing. He called Leonard's cell phone, straight to voicemail. For one unsteady moment, Ethan considered doing exactly what every instinct screamed at him to do. Leave. Step out from behind the desk, walk into the parking lot, get in his car, and never come back. But there were still 41 occupied rooms in the building. He couldn't just abandon them because of a phone prank and a broken camera feed. Could he? The phone rang a third time. He stared at it as though it were a snake. Room 713. He answered on the 4th ring. What do you want? For a second, there was only static, low and granular. Then a man spoke. Sir, I'm calling from room 713. There appears to be a woman in my bathroom. The voice was his own. Not similar, not close. Exact. Every inflection, every breath. Ethan nearly dropped the handset. Who is this? I'm sorry to bother you, his voice said politely. She keeps saying she works here. A wet dragging sound passed over the line. She says her name is Ethan. Ethan slammed the phone down so hard the bass rattled. His heart was pounding now in brutal, uneven blows. Fight or flight had narrowed the whole world into bright, precise fragments. The blinking modem lights, the smell of stale coffee, the hum of the mini fridge in the staff nook. the thin sweat gathering between his shoulder blades. He needed another person. He needed proof that this was happening outside his own head. He snatched the master keyring and left the desk, crossing the lobby in quick strides toward the security office off the service hall. The fluorescent lights overhead seemed dimmer back there, their buzz harsher, more insect-like. The carpet gave way to worn, industrial tile. He passed the employee break room, linen storage, and the cramped accounting office before reaching the security room. The door was ajar. Inside, Leonard's chair sat pushed back from the monitor desk. A styrofoam cup of coffee had spilled across the floor and dried in a long brown fan. One of the monitors showed the parking lot. Another displayed the front entrance from a strange angle, as if nudged. The rest were black. "Leonard?" No answer. The air in the room smelled wrong, sharp and metallic beneath the stale scent of coffee. Ethan's eyes tracked downward. There were wet footprints on the floor, bare feet, not human-sized. Longer, too narrow. The toes elongated into almost finger-like shapes. The prints led from the corner behind the monitor bank to the open door and out into the hall. He backed away instinctively. Then he saw the wall. At first, it looked like water damage. A dark stain smeared chest-high across the beige paint. But when he leaned closer, stomach twisting, he realized it wasn't a stain. It was writing, scrawled in thick, uneven letters as though drawn with a filthy wet hand. "Don't send him up." Ethan stumbled backward so hard he hit the door frame. The service hall lights dimmed, just for a second. When they brightened again, something stood at the far end of the corridor near the stairwell door. A bellhop. Old-fashioned uniform, red jacket, brass buttons, pillbox cap tucked under one arm. His posture was formal, almost courteous, but his face, at first Ethan's brain refused to process it. The features were arranged correctly, but subtly, terribly wrong. Eyes a little too low, smile stretched too far, skin with the waxy sheen of something preserved in cold storage and then left out to soften. He looked like a person assembled from memory by something that had only ever watched humans through a keyhole. The bellhop lifted one white-gloved hand and beckoned. Ethan ran. He sprinted back through the service hall, past the break room, past the dark administrative corridor, and burst into the lobby so hard he nearly slipped. His breath tore in and out of him. He locked himself behind the front desk and grabbed the phone to dial 911. No signal. The line hissed once, then emitted a long, droning tone that sounded disturbingly like breathing. He checked his cell phone. No service. Not one bar. Outside, neon still burned beyond the glass doors. Cars still moved along the distant street, but the hotel suddenly felt cut away from the city, as if the silver lantern no longer existed in the same place as everything around it. Then the elevator dinged. Ethan looked up. Elevator 2 had arrived in the lobby. The doors slid open with a metallic whisper. Inside stood a woman in a cream-colored nightgown, her skin gray and damp, her eyes blown wide with terror. Around her throat were dark bruises. When she spoke, her lips barely seemed to move. "You answered," she said. Then all the lights in the lobby went out. Darkness in a hotel is never absolute. There are always emergency signs, appliance LEDs, street glare bleeding through curtains somewhere. But what swallowed the Silver Lantern lobby in that moment was heavier than ordinary dark. It pressed against Ethan's eyes like cloth. For one stunned instant, he could hear only the elevator cables settling, the aquarium filter choking to a stop, and his own ragged breathing. Then the backup lights came on. A weak amber strip glowed along the baseboards and exit signs. The chandeliers remained dead. Shadows crowded the ceiling. The elevator stood open and empty. The woman was gone. Ethan swallowed a cry and backed into the desk hard enough to jar the keyboard. His hands shook so violently he fumbled the flashlight twice before getting it on. The beam cut a bright tunnel through the gloom, catching dust motes and the gold trim on the lobby columns. No one. He forced himself to think. Power outage, hallucination, stress response. But none of those explanations accounted for the bruised woman, the camera feed, or the thing in the bellhop uniform at the end of the hall. The phone rang again. In the darkened lobby, the sound was unbearable. Shrill, invasive, almost triumphant. He let it ring once, twice. 3 times. Then he answered because not answering now felt worse, as though the call would simply keep ringing until something else picked up. "Who are you?" The woman spoke immediately, as if she had been waiting with her lips against the receiver. "My name was Evelyn Wren." "Was?" Ethan's throat tightened. "What do you mean, was?" "He checked in with me on a Thursday." Her voice had changed. It was no longer frantic, but distant and dreamlike, as if she were remembering the shape of fear rather than living inside it. "He told me he worked for the hotel. He carried my bags. He knew my husband's name. He smiled all the time." A pause. "He never blinked." The emergency lights hummed softly overhead. Somewhere deep in the building, a pipe knocked 3 times. "I need you to listen carefully," Ethan said, hearing the thinness of his own voice. "What is happening here?" "He keeps what answers him." "Who?" "The guest." The last word came out in a whisper so filled with disgust and dread that Ethan felt his scalp tighten. Before he could speak again, another voice entered the line. "Sir." His voice, pleasant, patient, professional. "We're receiving complaints about noise from the lobby." Ethan yanked the receiver away from his ear and slammed it down again. He was panting now, chest tight, hands numb. His flashlight beam swept across the registration racks, the brochure stand, the dead aquarium. Something pale moved behind the glass front doors, a face pressed from the outside. Ethan lurched backward, but when he snapped the beam toward it, there was only his own reflection and the red glow of signage across the street. The radio on the desk crackled. At first, he thought it was Leonard finally responding, but the sound that came through was much too soft. A woman humming. The tune was old-fashioned and tuneless, the kind of melody a mother might use to calm a child. It leaked through the static in short, broken fragments, then stopped. A man spoke instead. "Front desk." Ethan didn't touch the radio. "How can I help you tonight?" His own voice again, coming from the clipped speaker at his elbow. Then laughter, low and breathy, as if several people were trying not to laugh all at once. He snatched the radio and hurled it across the lobby. It struck a column and burst into pieces. The emergency lights flickered. On instinct, Ethan looked to the elevators. Both were closed. Above them, the floor indicator on elevator 2 lit up in red. 7. A second later, 6. The elevator was descending from a floor that didn't exist. Ethan backed away until his shoulders hit the brochure rack. The indicator paused. Then it changed. Oh, lobby. The doors began to open. He ran before he saw what was inside. He cut through the side hallway and shoved through the staff-only door into the service corridor, flashlight beam jerking wildly over beige walls and utility carts. His shoes slapped the tile. Every step sounded too loud. He reached the stairwell and yanked the handle. Locked. He pulled harder. Nothing. Hotels did not lock stairwells from the inside. He knew that much. Yet the bar refused to move, as though welded in place. Behind him, something wet tapped softly against the floor. Tap. Tap! Tap. Bare feet. Ethan spun, beam shaking. At first, he saw only the empty hall. Then the light found a shape standing half behind a laundry cart 20 feet away. The woman. Evelyn. She looked more solid now, but worse. Water, or something thicker than water, darkened the front of her gown. The bruises around her neck had spread into black-violet blooms. One eye was slightly lower than the other, as if her body still remembered the violence done to it. "He's awake," she said. "Who is he?" Her gaze drifted past Ethan toward the lobby. Her lips trembled. "He likes being invited." "I didn't invite anyone." "You answered." Before Ethan could respond, she suddenly lurched forward and seized his wrist. Her hand was ice cold and impossibly strong. The flashlight dropped from his other hand, clattering across the floor. For one wild second, Ethan tried to yank free, but Evelyn pulled him with frantic force toward the far end of the corridor. "Come on!" He stumbled after her, more from shock than trust. She moved in jerking bursts, half running, half gliding, dragging him past the linen room toward a service elevator Ethan had never used. The elevator doors were older than the others, steel with a narrow vertical window clouded by scratches. Evelyn slapped the call button. Nothing. Behind them, from somewhere in the lobby, came the clear ding of an opening elevator. Then footsteps, measured, unhurried, leather soles, not bare feet this time. Evelyn's fingers dug deeper into Ethan's wrist. "Don't let him speak to you." "What is he?" The service elevator shuddered somewhere above them. He was never a man. The footsteps entered the service hall. Ethan snatched the flashlight from the ground and raised the beam. The bellhop stood at the bend in the corridor. Up close, he was worse than Ethan had imagined. His face had the smoothness of wet wax stretched over bones arranged by guesswork. The eyes were bright and wrong, too reflective, like black marbles under a skin-thin glaze of blue. The smile was not painted on. It was carved by habit. His uniform looked immaculate except for the cuffs, which were darkened with old brown stains. "Mr. Cole," he said warmly, "you left the desk unattended." Ethan's stomach dropped. He had never told it his name. The service elevator doors crawled open behind them with a rusty groan. Inside was darkness. No cabin lights, no floor buttons that Ethan recognized. Only a cramped square space lined with old wood paneling and a brass handrail. Evelyn shoved him toward it. "Go." "What about you?" The bellhop took one polite step forward. "Sir, please return to your station." Evelyn's mouth opened in a soundless scream. For a flash of a second, her face changed. Not merely bruised now, but crushed. Throat split darkly at one side, jaw hanging at an impossible angle. The image hit Ethan like a blow. He staggered into the elevator. She followed. The doors shut just as the bellhop reached the threshold. For one split second before they sealed, Ethan saw the smile leave its face. Not because it was angry, because it was hungry. The elevator jolted upward. "No buttons," Ethan gasped, pressing against the rear wall. "Where is this going?" Evelyn stood in the opposite corner, head bowed. The darkness inside the cab thickened around her, making the edges of her body blur. "It goes where it remembers." The elevator rose far longer than it should have in a 6-story building. The air changed as they ascended. It grew colder, but also damp, carrying a smell Ethan knew at once and wished he didn't. Old standing water, mildew, mold. And beneath all of it, the dusty sweetness of perfume gone stale in a sealed room. The elevator stopped. The doors opened. Ethan stared into a hallway that did not and should not exist. It matched the camera feed exactly. Red patterned carpet, yellowed wallpaper with a faded floral print, brass sconces, dark wood trim. The hall stretched farther than the hotel's actual footprint allowed, vanishing into a dim bend that seemed to curve slightly upward like a throat. On the wall nearest the elevator hung a tarnished plaque, 7th floor. Every rational thought Ethan possessed simply failed. He stepped out on reflex, his shoes sinking into thick carpet. The air felt dense here, as if the floor were underwater in some invisible way. The wallpaper was stained in long, vertical streaks. Some doors stood shut. Others gaped open by an inch or two, revealing nothing but blackness inside. Room numbers lined the hall, all odd numbers on one side, even on the other. At the far end, where the corridor bent, a service cart stood abandoned. White towels had turned gray with age. One of them moved slightly, as though something beneath it had just exhaled. "What is this place?" Ethan whispered. Evelyn lingered near the elevator, her outline flickering. The part they sealed. Sealed from what? Her eyes lifted slowly to meet his. From the people who stayed. A phone rang somewhere down the hall. A shrill, old-fashioned ring. Once, twice, 3 times. Room 713. Ethan didn't know how he knew that, but he did. The number seemed to press itself into his thoughts, dragging them toward the source like a hook. Evelyn stepped forward, suddenly urgent again. "Listen to me. He can only make copies from what is left behind. Voices, faces, mannerisms, pieces. That's why they aren't right." "Copies?" Ethan said. "Copies of who?" "You, me, everyone who answers him." A door nearby swung inward with a soft creak. Ethan swung the flashlight. Inside room 709, a man sat on the bed. Business suit, gray hair, slight stoop in his shoulders. The guest from earlier, the one who had asked about the 4th week. His hands were folded neatly in his lap. His head was lowered. Ethan took a cautious step toward the doorway. "Sir?" The man's head lifted. His face was smooth. Not scarred, not masked. Smooth, like skin poured over wet clay before any features had been pressed into it. No eyes, no nose, no mouth. Yet when it spoke, it used the businessman's dry, amused tone. Fourth week. Ethan recoiled. More doors began to open along the hall, not all the way, just enough. In one room, a woman in a sequined dress leaned against the wall with both wrists bent backward. In another, something small and child-sized crouched beneath a luggage rack, whispering to itself in a chorus of adult voices. Farther down, a pair of hands gripped a door frame from inside a room too dark to reveal the body attached to them. Every figure looked incomplete, unfinished, wrong. All of them were watching Ethan. The phone kept ringing. Evelyn clutched his arm again. "We don't have long." "Then tell me how to stop it." She hesitated. The hallway lights dimmed, then steadied. "He needs a clerk." "What?" "He always starts with the desk, the voice at the desk, the welcome, the permission." Her own voice frayed with panic. "He can't cross over cleanly without one." The implication settled over Ethan with leaden horror. "This has happened before." "Yes." "How many times?" She looked down the hall. Enough that the hotel learned to bury a floor. Something thumped inside room 711. Then again, a body hitting a wall from within. The bellhop's voice drifted from the far end of the corridor, cheerful and calm. "Mr. Cole, your guest is waiting." Evelyn pulled Ethan forward. 713. They moved fast now, past doors that leaked whispers and faint sobbing, past wall sconces buzzing with weak yellow light. The carpet beneath Ethan's shoes felt damp in places. Once, something brushed his ankle from beneath a bed frame visible through an open door, and he nearly screamed. At last they reached it. Room 713. The door stood slightly open. Inside, a phone rang on the nightstand beside the bed. The room looked older than the rest of the floor, almost untouched by time. Green floral wallpaper, a vanity with a cracked oval mirror, heavy curtains drawn across the windows. One bedside lamp glowed weakly. There was a suitcase on the luggage rack and a woman's white gloves laid neatly beside it, as though she had just arrived. Ethan knew with awful certainty that he was looking at a room preserved at the moment of some terrible event. The phone kept ringing. "Don't answer it," Evelyn said instantly. He stared at her. "You said he likes being answered." "Yes, not that one." "Then why are we here?" Her expression shifted into something like shame. "Because this is where he started wearing me." A shape moved in the mirror. Ethan turned sharply. At first there was only his reflection, pale and terrified. Then behind him in the mirror alone, he saw the bellhop standing in the doorway. He spun. Nothing there. Back in the mirror, the bellhop smiled wider. Evelyn's grip tightened painfully. "Don't look at mirrors for too long." The phone stopped ringing. Silence flooded the room. Then the bathroom door clicked open by itself. Something inside breathed. Not human breathing. Too many layers. Several inhales arriving at once, all out of sync. The smell hit next. Mildew, perfume, copper, and something sweetly rotten. From the bathroom came a voice in Ethan's tone. "Housekeeping." Then a woman's voice. "Front desk." Then Leonard's sleepy drawl. "Security." Then Marisol's clipped, irritated cadence. "Do not leave the desk unattended for long." Ethan backed toward the room door, but it slammed shut behind him with a force that shook the frame. The bedside lamp went out. Only the bathroom light remained, thin and yellow under the half-open door. Something wet dragged across tile inside. Evelyn's face had gone rigid with terror. "He's coming through wrong." "What does that mean?" But she was already fading, her body breaking apart into static-like shimmer around the edges. No, stay with me. I can't for long. He remembers me less each time." The bathroom door opened another inch. A hand appeared around the edge, white-gloved. Its fingers were too many. Ethan grabbed the lamp base from the nightstand as the door burst inward, and the thing from the service hall unfolded into the room. It still wore the bellhop uniform, but the disguise had begun to fail. One shoulder was much higher than the other. Its smile now split nearly to the hinges of its jaw. Beneath the jacket, its torso moved as if several bodies were shifting under one layer of fabric, trying to settle into a single shape. Faces rose and sank faintly beneath the skin at its neck like people trapped under thin ice. And its eyes were Ethan's. "I've been practicing," it said in his voice. Then it rushed him. Ethan swung the lamp with every ounce of terror in his body. It connected with the thing's head in a burst of sparks and ceramic. The creature reeled, not bleeding but folding strangely, as if struck clay had briefly forgotten its own shape. Ethan lunged for the door. Locked. The creature laughed behind him, a dozen voices stacked together. "You already let me in." Its hand closed around the back of his neck. Cold shot through Ethan's whole body. Not temperature, memory. Foreign memory. He saw flashes not his own. Hotel guests checking in over decades. A wedding dress stained dark at the hem. A drunk man collapsing in the stairwell. A child singing into a hairbrush mirror. Leonard asleep in the security room. Marisol standing at the desk years younger and saying something Ethan could not hear because her mouth was filled with black water. He screamed and drove his elbow backward. The creature loosened just enough. Evelyn appeared beside it in a blur of gray-white motion and slammed both hands into its chest. For the first time, it made a sound of true pain, not a roar, not a shriek. 1,000 voices all saying no in perfect unison. The wall mirror exploded. Shards tore through the air. Ethan ducked and covered his face. When he looked up, Evelyn had the creature pinned against the vanity, her ruined face inches from its stolen one. "Remember me," she hissed. The room light strobed once, twice. The creature's body convulsed, faces bulging beneath its skin in rapid succession. Men, women, old, young, some screaming, some expressionless. Evelyn turned to Ethan. "Find the ledger." "What ledger?" The check-in book, original desk. He writes himself in." The creature's arm snapped around and punched through Evelyn's abdomen. Her body flickered violently. She gasped, more in surprise than pain. "The desk," she said again, "where they first welcomed him." Then she was thrown across the room and vanished through the wall like smoke sucked into a vent. The creature straightened slowly. Its smile returned, but shakier now, less certain. "You shouldn't have listened to her," it said. Ethan found the doorknob suddenly turning freely under his hand. He ran. He tore down the 7th-floor hall as doors banged open on either side. Hands reached. Voices called his name in tones borrowed from people he knew. The faceless businessman stepped out into the corridor, suit hanging wrong from his shoulders, but Ethan barreled past him. At the elevator, he hit the call button with blood-slick fingers, only then realizing his forearm had been cut by flying glass. The elevator doors were already open. Inside stood Marisol, or something that looked like her. Same uniform blazer, same severe bun, same pinched mouth, but her eyes were black and depthless. And when she smiled, Ethan saw rows of tiny blunt teeth packed behind her lips like those of a deep-sea fish. "Late for your shift?" she asked. He veered away and sprinted for the stairwell instead. This time the door opened. He stumbled into darkness and began descending, his flashlight beam jerking over concrete steps and cinder-block walls. Somewhere above him, the creature entered the stairwell at a measured pace. It didn't rush. It knew the building better than he did. On the landing between floors 6 and 5, Ethan found a fire door hanging half open and crashed through it into the 6th-floor hallway. Normal carpet, normal wallpaper, normal room numbers. He bent double, gasping. For a single blessed second, the hotel seemed ordinary again. Then every room phone on the floor began ringing at once. 100 shrill tones erupted in perfect synchronization up and down the corridor. Doors cracked open as sleepy guests muttered from within. A man in boxer shorts poked his head out of 606, squinting in confusion. Ethan waved frantically. "Get back inside. Lock your doors." The guest stared at him as if he were insane. From the far end of the hall, elevator 2 dinged. Its doors slid open. The bellhop stepped out smiling in Ethan's face. Not like Ethan's face. His face exactly. The guest in boxer shorts blinked once, looked from Ethan to the thing wearing Ethan, and frowned. "What the hell?" The creature turned to him with warm professional courtesy. "Sir, please return to your room." The guest obeyed instantly, face going slack as though all thought had been switched off. His door closed. Ethan understood then that this thing didn't merely imitate. It compelled. Not everyone, not always, but enough. The phones kept ringing. Doors opened farther. Guests emerged, dazed, sleepy, confused, drawn into the hall by the noise. The creature smiled with Ethan's mouth. "See," it said, "a full house. And for the first time, Ethan understood what the hotel truly was. Not haunted, managed. Ethan didn't think. He moved. He grabbed the red fire alarm pull station beside room 608 and yanked it down hard. A siren erupted through the hotel, loud, metallic, relentless. Strobes flashed overhead. The corridor filled with startled cries as guests jerked fully awake and began stumbling into the hall in confusion. The synchronized phone ringing stopped at once, cut off by the shriek of the alarm. The creature's smile vanished. Good, Ethan thought wildly. It hated disruption. Evacuate, he shouted, pounding on doors as he ran. Everyone out! Use the stairs! Move! Some guests obeyed from instinct. Others hesitated, looking between Ethan and the identical face standing farther down the hall. The sight of two Ethans broke whatever spell the thing had been laying over them. Panic spread the human way, messily, chaotically, fast. A woman screamed. Someone shouted that there was smoke. There wasn't, but fear didn't care. The creature stepped toward Ethan through the flashing red light, and with every pulse of the strobe, its disguise slipped. One blink showed Ethan's exact body. The next showed the bellhop. The next showed a tall, faceless shape in hotel livery, features washing and rearranging like reflections in disturbed water. You're making this difficult, it said, its voice now layered from many throats at once. Good. Ethan sprinted for the elevators not to use them, but because beside them hung an antique brass-framed display case he had noticed on his first day and never paid much attention to after. The case contained sepia photographs of the Silver Lantern from earlier decades. Grand opening, renovation, lounge reopening, staff portrait, circa 1982. He smashed the glass with the fire extinguisher he snatched from the wall. Shards cascaded over the carpet. Guests screamed and backed away. The creature flinched, not from the broken glass, but from the photograph Ethan tore loose from the backing. It showed the original front desk. Not the current sleek laminate counter installed in the 1990s, but an older, darker desk of polished walnut with carved trim and a brass room keyboard behind it. And standing beside that desk in the photo, half hidden behind smiling staff members, was the bellhop. Same waxy grin, same dead attentive posture. He had been there in 1982, maybe earlier. The thing lunged. Ethan ducked, and the extinguisher canister smashed into the wall where his head had been. Plaster burst outward. Guests fled toward the stairwell in a crush of shouting bodies. Ethan bolted for the service hall, clutching the photograph. The creature followed. He could hear it now moving less like a person and more like a sack of wet bones dragged upright by hatred. Arms or limbs, or things that functioned like limbs, struck the walls as it came. Guest room doors banged in its wake. The sirens howled. Red strobes flashed through the hall in bloody pulses. Ethan tore through the service corridor toward the administrative wing. He remembered the old renovation plans stored there, remembered Darnell muttering about sealed spaces and Marisol's clipped warning not to go wandering. If the original front desk still existed, it would be in the sub-level storage rooms beneath the offices. He didn't know this for sure. He only knew buildings didn't forget themselves easily, and neither did whatever lived inside this one. The admin corridor was dark. The overhead fluorescents had gone dead, leaving only intermittent red alarm lights spinning weakly from the ceiling at the far end. File cabinets loomed like gravestones. Doors stood ajar. Somewhere, water dripped in a slow, patient rhythm. Ethan hit the basement access door and found it unlocked. Concrete stairs descended into cold blackness. He didn't hesitate. The creature was too close now. He thundered down into the sub-level, flashlight bouncing over old utility pipes, rusted shelving, broken banquet chairs. The air smelled of dust, electrical heat, and something older, the mineral dampness of sealed places. Behind him, footsteps entered the stairwell, measured again, almost amused. Ethan burst into the storage basement and swept the flashlight in frantic arcs. Crated holiday decorations, rolled carpets, defunct slot machines from some ancient partnership deal, a stack of headboards wrapped in cloudy plastic. Against the far wall, half hidden under tarps and boxed records, something large and rectangular made of dark wood. He ran to it and yanked the tarp away. The original front desk. It was smaller than the current one, but unmistakable from the photograph. Walnut surface, carved trim, old switchboard cutouts. A brass plaque on one corner read Silver Lantern Hotel, in elegant script blackened by age. On the desktop lay a ledger, not dusty, not decayed. Waiting. Ethan's flashlight beam trembled over it. Leather cover, brass clasp, pages swollen slightly with age. He opened it. The first page listed guests from the hotel's earliest years in neat fountain pen script. Dates marched forward decade by decade. Names, room numbers, notes in margins. Nothing overtly wrong, until the entries from January 1982. There, on a page brittle with age, the handwriting changed. Not the penmanship of a clerk, but something careful and imitative, trying very hard to look human. January 14th, 1982. Mr. Guest Room 713. No surname, no address, no payment method. Just those two words, written with obsessive precision. Below that entry, later names began to stutter strangely down the pages. Some were crossed out. Some trailed into illegible loops, as if the writer's hand had lost structure mid-word. Entire sections were water damaged, and beneath the stains, Ethan thought he saw more names pressing faintly through from later pages, as though the book had continued writing itself long after the hotel tried to shut it away. A voice drifted from the shadows beyond the storage shelves. Found it then. The creature stepped into the beam. It no longer bothered holding one face. Features moved across it in restless tides. Ethan's eyes, Evelyn's bruised throat, Leonard's nose, Marisol's cheekbones, strangers layered under strangers. The bellhop cap remained perched neatly atop its shifting head. Its white gloves were soaked dark to the wrists. I was beginning to worry you'd make me teach you, it said. Ethan backed behind the desk, gripping the ledger. How do I stop you? The creature's expression arranged itself into patience. You don't. You register me. That's all anyone's ever done. It tilted its head. Welcome, a sign, allow. No. The siren above them was muffled now, almost distant, but the red alarm light still spun down the stairwell, sending slow pulses into the basement like a heartbeat. The thing took another step. The hotel is old. People come here wanting to be someone else. Lucky, rich, desired, untouchable. They arrive full of names they've already abandoned. Its smile widened along several mouths at once. I simply help. Ethan swallowed hard. You kill them. Sometimes. A shrug rippled across shoulders that didn't align. Sometimes I improve them. Sometimes I only borrow. It looked at the ledger in his hands. But I always need a clerk. Doors mean nothing without someone to say, come in. That was why it used the desk first. Why it mimicked the voice of authority. Why every cycle began with the front desk answering a call. The hotel didn't contain it. The hotel serviced it. Something moved in the darkness to Ethan's left. Evelyn emerged between two shelving units, faint as smoke and twice as fragile. Her form flickered with every turn of the red light. Half her face had collapsed again into the memory of death. Don't listen, she whispered. The creature's shifting eyes cut toward her. Genuine loathing entered its voice. You were checked out. Evelyn ignored it and looked at Ethan. He can only stay if he's written in. The creature smiled. Partly true. Then I destroy the ledger. For the first time, it stopped moving. That stillness told Ethan he was right. He snatched a metal lighter from the desk drawer, an old souvenir torch left beside dried pens, and flicked it. Miraculously, it sparked. The creature lunged. Evelyn screamed and threw herself into it. Their bodies collided in a burst of distortion that made the basement lights blow out entirely. For one impossible second, the darkness became crowded with faces. Dozens, maybe hundreds, pushing out from the creature's skin, all gasping for air. Ethan touched the flame to the ledger. At first, nothing happened. Then the page edges blackened. The book screamed. Not metaphorically. A high, splitting shriek burst from the pages themselves, and ink began to writhe across the paper in frantic lines. Names wrote and rewrote themselves. The entry for Mr. Guest bled outward, letters stretching like insects under magnification. The creature convulsed. It flung Evelyn aside and struck the desk with both hands. Wood cracked. Ethan stumbled backward, nearly dropping the book, but the flames had caught now, orange and greedy along the dry leather spine. "No," the creature said. Its voice no longer mimicked humanity at all. It was deep and wet and echoing, like many mouths speaking from a flooded room. It vaulted the desk with impossible speed and hit Ethan full force. They slammed into the concrete floor. The burning ledger skidded away beneath a shelf. The creature's hands closed around Ethan's throat. Cold flooded him again, stronger than before. Memories poured through him, but now not in flashes, in torrents. A miner dying in a boarding house long before Vegas was Vegas. A widow checking into a roadside inn under another name. A bellhop standing in a fire-lit lobby in the 1920s, smiling as travelers shook rain from their coats. Rooms changing, owners changing, carpets, wallpaper, architecture, neon, decades, everything shifting around one constant hunger, wearing hospitality like a uniform. The guest had never belonged only to the Silver Lantern. It had moved from hotel to hotel, inn to inn, following the ritual of welcome. Names, rooms, permission. Ethan gagged under the pressure on his throat. The creature leaned closer, and faces swam across its skin in feverish succession until finally it settled on Ethan completely. Perfectly. He was staring up at himself. "See?" it whispered in his own voice. "You fit." From beneath the shelving units, orange light flared brighter. The burning ledger had ignited something else. Old papers, cardboard, dry cloth. Smoke began to crawl along the concrete. The creature hesitated, just enough. Evelyn rose behind it with a terrible broken grace, seized its head in both hands, and twisted. Not to break its neck, it didn't have one to break, but to force it to look at the fire, at the ledger blackening into curled skeletal paper. The scream that tore from it then shook dust from the basement pipes. Its body destabilized instantly. Faces burst through the skin and dissolved. Arms lengthened, split, reformed. Beneath the uniform was no body at all, only a writhing congregation of stolen shapes fighting to remain singular. Ethan rolled free, coughing. The flames spread fast across the boxed records, sending a wall of sparks up one side of the storage room. Fire alarms above the siren became real now, sprinkler lines clanking awake somewhere overhead. The creature staggered toward the burning ledger, but every step cost it form. Part of one leg dissolved into streaming black fluid. Its bellhop cap fell away and split on the floor like rotten fruit. Evelyn stood between it and the fire. "You took my face," she said. The creature reached for her. She did not move. "You don't get to keep his." Then she stepped backward into the flames with both hands locked around the thing's wrists. For an instant, fire passed through her harmlessly, because she was already dead. But it wrapped the creature in sudden ravenous light. It shrieked and thrashed, trying to pull free, yet Evelyn held on with impossible ferocity, dragging it deeper into the blaze, swallowing the desk and shelving behind it. Its voices burst out in a storm. "Front desk? How can I help? Please, don't let him. Welcome. Sir, room 713. Then the sprinkler system exploded overhead. Water hammered down in freezing sheets. Steam burst upward. Fire hissed. Smoke thickened. Ethan shielded his face and crawled for the stairs through a slurry of soot and black water. Behind him, in the drowning half-light, he saw Evelyn one last time. Not ruined now, not bruised, but as she might once have been, standing tall in the rain of the sprinklers with one hand lifted toward him, not waving, releasing. Then the burning ledger collapsed inward, the pages folding into ash. The creature gave a final sound like a whole hotel exhaling all its dead at once, and the basement went dark. When Ethan came back to himself, he was lying on the asphalt of the rear service alley beneath flashing red emergency lights. Firefighters moved in and out of the hotel loading entrance. Paramedics crouched beside him, checking his pupils, asking his name, asking what hurt, asking whether he knew what day it was. His throat was wrapped in pain where the thing had choked him. His lungs felt scraped raw from smoke. The dawn sky over Las Vegas had begun to pale to a sickly lavender gray. He answered what questions he could. Electrical fire in basement storage. Alarm pulled on 6th floor. Guests evacuated. Those were the facts that survived daylight. Leonard was found unconscious in the security office with a concussion and severe dehydration, but alive. He remembered nothing after spilling his coffee. Several guests complained of bizarre dreams and auditory hallucinations during the evacuation. One businessman, the same one who had warned Ethan, had vanished entirely, though management insisted later that no guest matching Ethan's description had ever checked in. Marisol arrived at the scene at 5:40 a.m., wearing a coat thrown over her nightclothes, face pale but composed. She listened to Ethan's fractured account with a stillness more chilling than disbelief. When he mentioned the 7th floor, her expression did not change. When he mentioned Evelyn Wren, something in her eyes flickered. "There was a fire in 1982, she said quietly, once the paramedics had stepped away. A partial structural collapse during renovation. Some records were lost." "Lost?" Ethan croaked. "Is that what you call it?" Marisol looked toward the hotel as smoke ghosted from the service entrance. "You should not say certain things out loud in a place like this." He stared at her. "You knew." She didn't answer directly. Instead, she handed him a paper cup of water from a case the firefighters had opened and said, "Older hotels have traditions. Graveyard clerks are told enough to keep order, not always enough to keep perspective." "There's no 7th floor," Ethan said. Marisol's gaze shifted to the upper facade of the building. "Not anymore." That answer lived under his skin like a splinter. The official story by noon was simple. A neglected electrical junction and basement storage had sparked a fire. A quick-thinking employee had pulled the alarm and prevented casualties. Ethan was praised, patted on the shoulder, photographed for an internal safety memo he never received. The city inspector flagged the basement damage. Insurance representatives came and went. By late afternoon, the Silver Lantern's management had already begun talking about reopening unaffected floors within days. That horrified him more than anything. He went to the hospital, got checked for smoke inhalation, and was discharged with painkillers and instructions to rest. He checked into a chain motel 2 miles away because the thought of sleeping anywhere near the Silver Lantern made him physically ill. He did not sleep much. Whenever he closed his eyes, he saw the thing in the bellhop uniform peeling through stolen faces. He heard the layered chorus of borrowed voices. He dreamed of endless hallways curving upward into impossible dark, room numbers repeating forever. Once, just before dawn, he woke convinced someone had whispered "front desk" directly into his ear. His throat bruises worsened over the next day. Finger marks surfaced in a pattern that didn't quite match human hands. He almost quit by text. He should have. But there were questions burrowing inside him now, questions too deep and too wrong to leave alone. So on his second night off, he drove back to the Silver Lantern and parked across the street. The hotel looked normal. That was the worst part. Windows lit, valet stand open, tourists smoking outside, a billboard by the entrance promising classic Vegas charm with modern comfort. No sign of fire except a faint soot stain near the rear alley. He sat in his car for 20 minutes watching the revolving doors, trying to convince himself the whole thing had been a trauma-shaped hallucination. Then he saw Darnell exit the side service door carrying a bag of debris. Ethan got out and intercepted him by the dumpster. The old maintenance man took one look at his face and muttered, "Damn." "You knew too." Darnell dropped the debris bag carefully and wiped his hands on his coveralls. He looked older outside the hotel, more tired, as if the building had been feeding on him in slow bites. "I knew enough not to stay after shift." "Tell me." Darnell glanced toward the hotel entrance. Back in the old days, they said a traveling guest checked in during a dust storm. No luggage, no car, no name anyone remembered right after hearing it. Bellhop took him up. Next morning, the room was empty, but the clerk who signed him in was gone too. After that, every few years, somebody else disappeared. A maid, a guard, a guest. Then, 1982. He shook his head. Management sealed the floor after the fire and pretended it had never existed. "Why keep the hotel open?" Darnell gave Ethan a look almost pitying. "Because Vegas doesn't close for ghosts." He reached into his pocket and handed Ethan something wrapped in a stained handkerchief. Inside was a brass room key tag, 713. It was blackened, as if once exposed to extreme heat. "I found it in the basement after the fire," Darnell said. "Didn't tell anyone." He lowered his voice. "Throw it in Lake Mead for all I care. Just don't bring it back." Ethan stared at the tag in his palm. It was warm, not metaphorically, actually warm. He looked up sharply, but Darnell was already backing away. "One more thing," the old man said. "If the phone rings at 1 a.m., do not answer." Then he went inside. Ethan stood alone in the alley with the brass tag burning slowly against his skin, and the growing, awful certainty that the fire had not ended anything. It had only forced it to change rooms. Ethan left Las Vegas 6 days later. He quit without notice, abandoned the apartment lease, sold half his furniture to a neighbor for cash, and drove west at sunrise with a duffel bag in the back seat and the brass 713 key tag sealed inside a coffee tin in the trunk. He told no one except his ex-wife, and even then he only said he needed to get out of Nevada for a while. By the time he crossed into California, he could almost imagine he had escaped. Almost. The bruises on his throat faded from purple to yellow. The nightmares became less frequent. He found temporary work at a roadside motel outside Bakersfield, the kind of place where truckers checked in after midnight and left before sunrise. It was the last kind of job he should have taken, but desperation makes hypocrites of everyone, and he needed cash fast. He told himself a motel wasn't the same as a hotel. He told himself old fears belonged to old buildings. For 2 weeks, nothing happened. Then on the 15th night at 1 a.m., the front desk phone rang. Ethan froze with a reservation card in his hand. The digital display read, "Room 13." His mouth went dry. This motel only had 12 rooms. The phone rang again. He let it ring until it stopped. For the next hour, nothing moved except the ceiling fan in the office and moths battering themselves against the bug zapper outside. Ethan laughed once, thin and shaky, at his own nerves. Maybe he had misread it. Maybe the display had glitched. At 2:07 a.m., the fax machine printed a single sheet of paper by itself. He nearly shouted. Across the blank page in damp gray letters was one line. "Thank you for transferring my reservation." Ethan quit before dawn. After that, the pattern repeated. No matter where he went, strange things collected around places of temporary lodging. A hostel in Flagstaff, an airport hotel in Denver, a bed and breakfast in Tulsa. He never stayed long enough for the phenomena to worsen, but each place gave him the same signs in smaller doses. Non-existent room numbers appearing in software systems, wake-up calls requested by guests who didn't exist, old photographs with one familiar smiling bellhop hidden in the background. 3 months later, Ethan understood the truth. The guest had not been tied to the silver lantern. The silver lantern had simply been one of its older nests. And when Ethan burned the ledger, when he disrupted whatever ritual kept it anchored there, he had not destroyed it. He had displaced it. Worse than that, he had become the new point of entry. The realization came in a hotel archive room in Albuquerque. By then, Ethan had turned desperate enough to start chasing records, tracking fires, disappearances, sealed floors, impossible room numbers across decades of American roadside hospitality. In a municipal archive, he found an 1891 article about a dead clerk discovered in the cellar of a railway inn in Kansas. No killer identified. Ledger damaged by water. One line quoted from the inn owner, "The boy kept insisting a room above the top floor had called for towels." Ethan's blood went cold. The article included a sketch of staff gathered outside the inn. There, at the edge of the drawing, stood a porter with a pleasant smile and one hand tucked behind his back. Even in sketch form, Ethan knew him. He left the archive shaking. That night, he checked into the cheapest motel he could find because he was too tired to drive farther. He set the brass 713 key tag on the sink, intending to throw it into the Rio Grande the next morning. At 12:58 a.m., the bathroom mirror fogged from the inside, not from steam. The room was cold. Letters appeared slowly across the glass, as if written by an invisible fingertip. "You kept the key." Ethan backed away until his calves hit the bed. At 1 a.m., the room phone rang. He unplugged it from the wall. It kept ringing. He snatched the receiver and hurled it into the bathroom. The cord tore free. The ringing stopped for 1 second. Then his cell phone lit up on the nightstand. Incoming call, front desk. He stared at it in mute horror. The motel didn't even have his cell number. The call stopped before he could decline it. A voicemail notification appeared immediately. Hands trembling, Ethan played the message on speaker. There was no greeting, only his own voice, calm and professional. "Good evening, Mr. Cole. We're pleased to inform you that your room is ready." Then another voice entered, soft and broken with static. "Evelyn, or what remained of her. You brought it with you." The message ended. The sink drain gurgled. Something moved in the bathroom. Ethan didn't think. He grabbed the brass key tag from the sink, snatched his bag, and ran for the parking lot barefoot. He threw the key as hard as he could into the dark drainage ditch behind the motel. It vanished into weeds and mud with a tiny metallic splash. He waited. Nothing happened. No scream, no apparition, no relief. Only the desert wind and the motel vacancy sign buzzing red in the darkness. For the first time, Ethan understood the final cruelty of it. The key was never the anchor. It was only a courtesy. He had already carried the real thing out with him.
That was 6 months ago.
Ethan doesn't work in hotels anymore. He doesn't stay in them unless he has absolutely no choice. And when he does, he leaves before midnight. He sleeps in his car more often than not. He rents rooms by cash and false names. He avoids mirrors in unfamiliar places. He never answers internal calls. He has one rule now. If a building has a front desk, he does not make eye contact with the clerk. Because sometimes, more often lately than he wants to admit, the clerk looks back at him with a flicker of recognition that no stranger should have. A pause too long, a smile too practiced. A voice just a little too familiar when they say, "Welcome, checking in." 3 nights ago, in a roadside lodge outside El Paso, Ethan passed the office window at 12:50 a.m. on his way to the vending machine and saw the night clerk seated behind the counter. Male, thin, mid-30s, head bent over paperwork, normal. At 12:51, the clerk looked up. It was Ethan. Not similar, not close, Ethan. Exactly as he had looked the night room 713 first called the Silver Lantern. Same loosened tie, same tired eyes, same expression of startled recognition. The man behind the desk smiled. Then he raised one finger to his lips. Ethan fled before the clock reached 1 a.m. He is driving east now, writing this account in rest stops and diners and parked gas stations because sleep has become dangerous and silence feels worse. He doesn't know whether telling the story helps or spreads it. He doesn't know whether Evelyn was warning him or apologizing. He doesn't know if the guest is following him, wearing him, or patiently becoming him room by room across the country. But he knows one thing with perfect certainty. Tonight, somewhere in America, an exhausted night clerk will be alone at a front desk just after midnight. The lobby will be quiet. The coffee will be stale. The lights will hum. An impossible room number will appear where no room should be. And at exactly 1 a.m., the phone will ring. When they answer, they will hear a frightened man whisper into the line, "Please, don't let him come back up." And the voice will be Ethan's.